They called it a settlement opportunity, a diplomatic gesture, a chance for humanity to demonstrate responsibility and worthiness as the newest and least trusted member of the Galactic Council. The official language was polite, carefully neutral, written by committees who believed that soft edges made sharp decisions less brutal. But everyone on Earth understood the truth. The Council gave humanity a trash planet. Not metaphorically, literally. A failed colony world where industry had been abandoned mid-process. Oceans gray with runoff. Soil poisoned by extractive manufacturing. Skies murked with suspended particulates so fine they could grind inside lungs. They called it Scrap World. Privately, among themselves. Never in the documents, never in front of humans. The invitation read, Stewardship Initiative, Demonstration of Cooperative Planetary Reclamation Capacity. Translated, we don't think you belong here yet, but if you can clean up our garbage, maybe one day you will. It wasn't a gift. It was a reminder of where humanity stood in the galactic order, useful, but not equal. And so the first ships launched. Not soldiers, not diplomats, not representatives in suits. Just people. Engineers, technicians, hydrologists, doctors, logistics planners, farmers, machinists, recycling specialists, miners who still remembered what rock smelled like. Volunteers mostly, some idealists, some desperate, some who didn't fit on Earth anymore, and some, the quiet ones, who simply wanted to see if humans could do something good without being told what shape good was supposed to look like. The Council observed silently. They expected three things: failure, complaints, and eventually, abandonment. They had data models, precedents, centuries of outcomes mapped into tidy curves. No young civilization had ever succeeded in stabilizing a scrap world. Most never made it past year 5. Humanity began work on day 1, not because they believed they could succeed, but because they had already moved in. And once humans move in, they don't leave easily. The documentaries rarely show the sound. There's always orchestral music, inspirational narration, swelling strings. Reality didn't swell. It scraped. Landing platforms wheezed under corrosive winds. Sealants failed faster than predicted. Everything smelled like rust and wet electronics. People stepped out onto the surface wearing respirators and cheap optimism. That optimism lasted about 48 hours. Then the storms came. Scrap world storms were not dramatic. They were grinding. Fine particulate dust, ground down from industrial byproducts, hung permanently in the atmosphere. When the wind picked up, it wasn't air that moved. It was blades. The storm stripped paint, etched windows, found every seal, every crack, every weakness. And people worked through it, because what else was there to do? Mara wasn't famous. There are no statues of her on Scrap World, no days marked with her name. If you walk through the capital now, you may pass under one of the water towers she designed, but you wouldn't know. She never signed anything. Mara arrived during the 3rd deployment cycle, a civil engineer from Lagos who had grown allergic to office buildings and the way committees could talk problems into stasis. Scrap World had a water problem, which is to say it technically had water. It just wasn't drinkable, breathable, or survivable. The Council measured toxicity in neat indexes. Mara measured it in funerals. So she stopped sleeping mostly. She turned storage units into lab benches, rebuilt filtration rigs out of broken drone chassis, coaxed microbacteria back toward life, and forced them to eat what no one wanted in their body. Slowly, steadily, ruthlessly, she pulled poison out of the sky. Not because she believed the project would succeed, but because she refused to let people die thirsty while the reports discussed funding allocations. Where in year 3, the air stopped tasting metallic when you took your mask off for a moment. That didn't make headlines. It made breathing possible. There's a difference. Jace didn't volunteer. He ran. Not from the law, not from scandal. He just ran out of patience. His file listed him as Logistics and Systems Continuity Specialist. Scrap World called him the guy who made things appear when we needed them. Jace never led anything, never gave speeches, wasn't inspirational. He was irritating, direct, blunt, unapologetic. If you said, "We need medical foam by tomorrow or 6 people die," Jace said, "Okay." And 6 hours later, the medical foam would be there, still tagged and recorded through absolutely proper channels, of course. No one ever proved otherwise. The Council analysts flagged emerging leadership structures. They noted, human resilience remains unusually centralized around individual initiative. They wrote papers about it. They did not understand it. Scrap World didn't grow like a colony. It accreted. People built with whatever didn't dissolve in the rain. Shipping containers turned sideways became row houses. Old fuel tanks became greenhouses. Drone lift cradles became playground climbing frames. Children played there. Because by year 5, there were children, born under red-brown skies, laughing in air that would have killed their grandparents. A new generation, native to failure, but not defined by it. Religion arrived quietly. So did music. So did arguments about music. Humans did not merely survive. They began to belong. History remembers big events. Scrap World remembers the long storm. It didn't have a name at the time. Storms just happened. But this one didn't stop. Weeks, then months. Dust thick enough to become land. Wind strong enough to find structures that had never existed when the planet was young. Crops failed. Solar grids dimmed. One of the early cities nearly vanished. Evacuation was impossible. There was nowhere to evacuate to. So people stayed. They lashed buildings together, ran power cables through wet corridors, slept next to machines that would kill them if seals failed. Mara didn't leave the filtration towers for 6 days. Jace broke into a council-restricted depot to salvage thermal shielding that no one admitted existed. Someone started reading stories aloud on the emergency broadcast channel. Because terror is easier to endure when it has a voice. The storm passed, eventually, and when the sky finally shuttered open, Scrap World didn't look ruined. It looked stubborn. The death toll hurt, deeply, but the council analysts noticed something else. Systems returned to operation faster than models predicted. Communities self-organized. Loss turned not into revolt, but into commitment. From orbit, Scrap World's progress was represented as graphs. Curved lines rising and falling. Production outputs, environmental indexes, population trends, everything understandable, everything manageable. The council recorded, Unexpected stability despite initial systemic disadvantages. Continue observation. They did not change their policies. No one expected humans to succeed. Not really. The inspector arrived in year 15. Not military, not political. Something worse. Neutral. Their task was simple: evaluate human stewardship effectiveness and recommend continuation or termination of the planetary lease. That word, lease. As if worlds were storage units, as if people could be tidied away like misplaced furniture. The inspector stepped out wearing sterilization layers and the expression of someone who was prepared to be disappointed politely. They expected shacks. They found neighborhoods. They expected desolation. They found parks. Not perfect ones. Grass still struggled. Flowers grew with effort. But children ran there, laughing, living. The inspector recorded, "Cultural presence detected." They saw murals made from recycled hull plates, water towers Mara designed, rail networks Jace built, homes with burnt cooking smells and laundry on lines and arguments drifting through open windows. Humans argued a lot. The inspector began to understand why. When you care about something, you fight over the details. Then everything changed. Quietly, slowly, inevitably. Scrap world became valuable. The environmental recovery surpassed benchmarks. Recycling yields outperformed council averages. Industry innovated instead of imitated. Trade flowed. Profit followed. And suddenly, the planet was no longer a test. It was an asset. The council requested a formal meeting. The speaker said, "The planet remains property of the council. Continued human habitation is no longer compatible with broader galactic resource allocation needs." Humans translated that as, "We gave you trash. You made it treasure. Now give it back." And for the first time, Earth and Scrap World spoke with one voice. They said, "No." The council clarified threateningly, "Refusal will be interpreted as hostile annexation." War was not declared, but its shadow stretched across the stars. Scrap World did not rush to speeches. They held meetings in classrooms, rail stations, and warehouses. People spoke of children, of graves, of streets laid by hand because there was nothing else to lay them with. A teacher said, "My students were born here. This is not a project. This is home." Someone wrote the line that would become law. "We do not measure worth in ownership. We measure it in care." The inspector filed a supplemental report, and for the first time in oversight history, it refused to follow template. It said Scrap World should be recognized as sovereign. Committees protested, corporations threatened, but the inspector would not retract. They concluded, "A civilization is not defined by where it begins, but what it refuses to abandon." The council hesitated, because war is expensive, and humans with nothing to lose are unpredictable. Fleets moved, diplomats argued, Scrap World prepared, not for conquest, but for loss. Shelters, medicine, drills, quiet courage. The inspector stood on a balcony at dusk and wrote, "If the council destroys Scrap World, they will not demonstrate power. They will demonstrate fear." War did not come, not because the council grew noble, but because they finally understood the truth. If humans could turn a trash world into a civilization, they could also turn injustice into fuel. And no one wanted to see what humanity would build from that. A compromise was reached. Publicly, Special Autonomous Stewardship Classification. Privately, you win. Scrap World did not celebrate. It exhaled. People went back to work. Trains ran. Children played. Water flowed. Because dignity does not need fireworks, just maintenance. Years later, tourists came, quietly and respectfully. They read the mural inscription. They gave us their broken things. We fixed them, including ourselves. Scholars argue about when humanity truly joined the galaxy. The inspector says it was the day humans stopped asking permission to care. Scrap World now orbits a dim star no one used to want. And yet there is a saying now, spoken half in respect and half in caution. Never give humans your trash.
They might build a future out of it, not because humans conquer, not because they dominate, but because when faced with ruin, they do what they have always done. They stay, they work, they argue, they laugh, they bury their dead, they raise their children, they build homes, and when the powerful return to reclaim the miracle they never believed would happen, humanity says with quiet steadiness, "This is ours, not because you gave it to us, but because we stayed."